For those that don't know, I'm Adam Granger. I'm Performance Director for Hockey Ireland. I am purely introducing this session. I obviously, invited Joe, Brennan and Dave Passmore to present tonight. And thank you to them for agreeing. And hopefully tonight will be a really beneficial 75 minutes we've put aside. I think as per the title, we've kept it quite broad, but essentially, we want to improve communications between all of our pathways, boys and girls side, and obviously David and Joe with their links and their national roles in the program.
The web.
They'll be able to give us good insight into their planning and their thoughts in relation to player development. We are a hockey community, a growing hockey community in Ireland, and it's really important that we continue to communicate that knowledge out wide and far. We are a lot of what will be discussed tonight, will be related back to our Hook for Life framework, which David has led on, and we're more than happy to provide more information upon the specific details of that. I'll let David and Joe bring more details into that. Last thing from me really was that this is a very informal gathering webinar. We would ask that you save messages for the end of each presentation. If there's something you really want to ask and you don't want to lose your track of thought, drop it into the chat box and Phil will get to it later in the event. But yeah, thanks again to Dave and Joe, and Phil is going to, as I say, field the questions at the end, and we'll hand over to Joe first, I believe. So thanks guys, and looking forward to listening in.
Hi guys, I'll just share my screen. Thanks, Adam. There's just to give you what my thoughts were on the purpose of the webinar and what myself and Dave are maybe trying to get across. And initially, it's really to support the coaches in player development, particularly in guiding players towards the high performance pathway. And really then to share some of the key focus areas that maybe we hold high value in. I know there's a lot of familiar faces there. For those who don't know me, just quickly, I've played Joe Brennan's my name. I've played most of my hockey in Glenanne and Dragons in Belgium. I played in the Irish team for about 10 years. Probably not my most glamorous photo as a player. And my coaching career, I started as a player coach at Tree Rock Rovers at Glenanne. And then I spent 3 years with Graham and the Irish senior women's team from 2015 up until the World Cup in 2018. And currently the Irish under 21 coach. I suppose the important part really about this is that in my career, I've been lucky enough to work with a number of different high class coaches or work under them or with them. Paul Revington for a number of years, who obviously coached the Irish team, South Africa, Malaysia, Great Britain women. Craig Fulton, who you all know, who's now who brought the guys to the Olympics and is now with Belgium, obviously a world and Olympic gold medalist. Arul, the current Malaysian coach, and then Graham, who I'm sure all of you know from Irish Ladies and now the New Zealand coach. And of course, there was a brief period with Dave as well. What that has done is given me a really good insight into some of the best coaches in the world. We've been really lucky in Ireland when you see that these guys have been involved from a coaching capacity, that they're all senior international coaches now and have been for maybe a couple of different teams. So hopefully I've taken a lot of different things from them and some of the best parts. My real understanding is that most people on this call are coaching teams who are competitive, who are in the higher end of competition, whether it be a club or international. And I suppose that the biggest difficulty is how do you improve individual players, particularly technically when you're playing competitive games week to week. You can, the opportunity is there pre-season, breaks during the season, obviously. But really it can be difficult because you just don't have the time to really focus on individuals. but how does this become a catalyst to improving them? And in my belief is that when players take themselves out of their comfort zone and learn to train out of their comfort zone as individuals and as teams, that's when they strive best, when they take the responsibility themselves. And that is where, as coaches, I think when you are battling week to week at times, you know, the most powerful tool you may have are questions. And this, it's quite the impact that it can have to simply ask the question of an individual as to what they are working on at the moment can bear huge fruit and huge rewards. Because if they're always aware of that question is going to be asked, they have to actually think about it. And there's a number of questions they can be asked. What are you taking from the strongest player in your team at the moment? And as coaches, I often wonder how often do we ask these questions? Because actually, again, when the individual takes the responsibility to answer these questions themselves is when they strive most, in my opinion. You know, if that individual is the strongest player in your group, whether it's school or province, you can ask the question of how are you continuing to make gains? What are you actually doing at the moment? Even though you're the strongest, are you working on a specific skill to get even better? Are you working on how to bring the players who are around you who maybe haven't got that skill set? Are you working on a way to explain skills to them better to help them? Are you working harder to cover the ground for these sort of players? There's so many things that will bring huge benefits. Sorry, mine. I think I just need to. Okay, so most importantly, what do I mean when I say, in my opinion, when players are training outside their comfort zone? What do we mean? So there's gameplay, and then there's the technical training. And in a gameplay scenario, it's, you know, it can become quite obvious when you say to a team or a group, as a coach, we want you to play outside your comfort zone. You know, you tend to understand that in real gameplay scenarios, it comes down to the physicality, running as hard as you can. You're under fatigue, you're trying to execute the skills under fatigue, and then you're trying to maintain discipline, whether it's verbally or whether it's in your defense or again in executing skills. But when it comes to technical training and you ask a group or you ask an individual, what do you mean when we say train outside your comfort zone? And quite often I think the initial response that people would have is it's some sort of technical drill, is that they need to try harder, or they believe in themselves as a player. I need to try harder. I need to be more intense. I need to be more serious. I need to put more pressure on every execution. But that's not what training outside the comfort zone is, in my opinion. And I think when we find the balance and get it right and have everybody on the same wavelength, you will get huge rewards. So when you have players playing outside their training outside their comfort zone, it does become an individual responsibility, but you obviously are driving it as a coach. So the best way to try and explain it is to maybe show two simple drills and how you can help players understand and then drive themselves to take the responsibility to continuously try and push that skill that they're trying to execute a little bit further. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a video. So this video would be about 2015, and this is the Irish senior women's team that would have gone on to the World Cup. And what you can see is a very simple skill being practiced. So it's the simple left to right pull. And when we zoom in here, what you will see is that it'll come to it. What you'll see is, for the most part, most players, if you were to take them out of a session and we'll do a 10-minute technical work here, and we want to try and train this outside your comfort zone, most players will try and execute a drag from here, from the left cone to the right cone, and they will do it at a comfortable pace. They might go a little bit quicker than they can. They won't try and go as fast as they possibly can. They won't try and pull it predominantly, or they won't try and pull it that extra yard and a half past where they want to go. Sorry, I'll just take it back to it. And when you watch what they're put music to it to obviously make it easier. So here's Jill Pinder practicing this skill. And then what I did was we made the video to show, actually, here's the execution of that in a World Cup semi-final. The exact skill they're working on, but the drag is so much further than what it initially was. And the responsibility does lie as coaches to not necessarily be working on this technical, to have the insight into technically exactly how this skill should be executed. Yes, it's something that we want to, of course, be aware of. But players will strive and figure it out themselves or make huge gains in doing it, as long as they try to go and push just outside their comfort zone within this single simple drill. And it's left to right, right to left, whatever the drill is. The important element for me, and we would have, obviously I would have done this as a coach, to show them why you need to do this. And if you go outside, you can see Jill Pinder, for example, here, just barely well inside her comfort zone. And when we progress it, and they train outside, and she pushes that a little bit harder, what you'll find is they make mistake after mistake, but they need to become comfortable doing it. And then it comes to the scenario where you can then show in a situation where they actually utilize it. A second really, really simple drill is, I'm sure we've all seen this, a player comes to receive, arcs around with the ball, and executes a pass. So what we're asking in this drill is that the player comes, receives the ball on the move, receives it continuing in the direction she's going, and he's going, and powers as fast as they possibly can around, as wide an arc as they can, and then execute a pass perfectly. And what you find happens so often at all levels is a player will come, will stop, will run at 3/4 pace, and then will drift by the time the pass has to happen. So what I want to show is that there's two very, very simple drills. And actually what you're asking of the players generally will require the coach to turn around and say, hey, are you running as fast as you possibly can? Are you trying to execute this skill outside your comfort zone? So that when it does come to a scenario where you're going to use it in a match, are you going as hard as you can, or are you hiding? Now, when you're coaching, in my opinion, players will always stay, or more often than not, until you work with them, they will stay within that comfort zone. And they won't execute. So if we give the example, your first touch is to go here and you power as hard as you can, and we complete the pass. There's each element of that will drift. The technical aspect is not necessarily what needs to be coached. Again, the responsibility lies with getting the message across to the player. This is what we're looking to do. So when it comes to technically training outside your comfort zone, it's not about doing repetition over and over and over and over under fatigue. It's about helping players understand that when they go to execute a skill or whatever they're doing, that they do it as fast and as hard as they can, and they break. So when you can then show the example, and this is obviously visually, it's important as a coach to show the example of the execution of this. And the execution is here where there is nothing but going at 100% as a player in real match scenario. You never go at a lower pace. So again, simple videos, you'll see that Anne O'Flanagan here receives and powers as hard as she possibly can. But if we were to run a training drill, if you were to monitor players, you'd say, how often do players do this part of the execution as hard as they possibly can, and then actually continue to execute that final pass? It's just a little insight into two really, really simple drills, and what I mean by working with players and giving them the responsibility to train just outside their comfort zone or continue to do so. When we speak about gameplay and intensity and outside your comfort zone, what's important for me, and I'm really hesitant to use the word intensity, because when we as coaches ask for intensity in gameplay scenarios, I think there's a huge misconception that it means playing direct. And a training session or a gameplay scenario, players will run as hard as they can and hit the ball forward as hard as they can and become just frantic. And I think it's important for terminology that both players and coaches understand what intensity is when it comes to gameplay scenarios. In a combative training, and you ask for intensity, what you're asking for, in my opinion, is you're asking for the quality of the effort that is put in, the value placed in all aspects, on every pass and everything you do at a really high standard with a real high quality, and maintaining a high level of basics. Same when it comes to marking or leading or whatever it is, all while under fatigue. And the difference between asking for intensity in combative gameplay scenarios and compared to playing direct hockey can be at all levels, it can be just totally misconceived. And it's really important, as again, terminology becomes a used thing. And what I would recommend, and I'm sure Dave would follow suit, one of the most important meetings you will have with a group of all ages is a terminology meeting when you start working with them, because what you want to have is everybody on the same wavelength. So things like this become suddenly it changes everyone's view on things. But when you as a coach, again, less coaching but more group understanding, that you put the onus on the players that this is the challenge that they need to take on, is understanding what you're asking for, and you're asking for intensity. So that's pushing outside your comfort zone from a gameplay scenario. What I wanted to speak about next, what I find really, really important then for players coming into looking to push towards high performance pathways, or players of a higher level, is that when you work with them on skills, that again, the responsibility comes from me upon you as coaches to help them understand when you want to work on a technical skill, to marry it with the game awareness. So I'll maybe give a golf analogy as sometimes the easiest way to do it. If you wanted to work on your golf swing, you might have the most perfect golf swing, but you may aim wrong, and you will try to fix your golf swing all the time, or you will lose confidence in your golf swing, but there's nothing wrong with your golf swing. You're just aiming in the wrong direction. So you may work with a group of players and you want to improve their technical skills, but they're not understanding when these skills should be used and the game awareness to know where they should be used. They lose confidence in it and then don't utilize it. So it's really important that the actual execution of the technical skill will often be developed by the individual themselves. Again, yes, you may need to support them, but a lot of the time they will figure it out themselves. Everybody's slightly technically different in what they may do. But what's important is they understand in the game awareness where it is to be used. So for example, a late receive and a right foot turn would be the examples that I will just use. I'll give you an example. So the first thing I would say, for example, with a late receive, which is it's a really important skill to have to want to play forward attacking style of hockey. The first thing I would ask is the questions. Are players aware of it? So when you're with a group, how aware are players of this skill? Again, it's the terminology. It sometimes can be hard to understand as a coach why somebody might not understand this or have heard of it. But you'd be surprised how often there might even be 2 or 3 people who've never heard of a late receive. They don't understand it, of all levels. How often is it used? When is it used? And what are the benefits of it? For me as a coach, and again, a lot of stuff I'll show you will probably be from when we were with the Irish ladies team, going through this process. We had to give a real visual on it to let everybody see where the skill is used and how important it is. And then the last part is, do you know how to execute the skill? So we made up a lot of videos like this, which I've no problem sharing them. Sorry. I would have added music to try and, if you want the music on, some lovely tunes. But what we try to do is show as many examples in different games of the late receive being executed. And you can see it over and over and over in the scenarios when it's to be utilized. So this brought an awareness of how often the skill is actually used, because you could watch a game like any sport and you don't realize, you just enjoy this girl receiving and pulling down the line, but not everybody's aware that was a late receive. This is a skill that she's worked on, has put a number of hours into. Again, a late receive. So it's important for me, again, responsibility as a coach, to show this to your players, to be aware of it yourself, to go, okay, is this a skill you need to execute in international hockey or to go to improve as a player? Yes. How often is it used in a game? When is it used in a game? When is appropriate? We'll come to an example with the Irish girls playing it, which is what we try to do. I'm sure at this stage you could add in, make a full video of the Irish team doing it, because they've done so well over the last number of years, but it gives them an example of it. So what you'll see here is you would break it down and say, okay, here's an example of Chloe Watkins receiving it in here. This is the correct position to late receive because of the position of the girls around her. So she's going to receive the ball here and she can let it run past her body and she's not going to be tackled. If there was an Indian girl standing here and Chloe continuously tried to do this skill here, she would lose confidence in it because she would be turned over. She would continuously try to execute a skill that you've been working on, but not in a game situation that's appropriate. So it's important as coaches that you understand this and that you visualize it, give a visualization and explain it to the players. Again, when you look at it here as an early example, a ball comes into Ali Meek here. She's in a really good position. She could have open received here. Okay, ball goes back. And we play, and it goes out. I think it's Jill Pinder. Open receives, beautiful receive, and off she goes. What's important is if this ball hadn't have gone to Jill Pinder, so Ali has, it's the clip you just watched, the ball goes back. When you look at the situation here, and if you imagine the ball was to go into Ali Meek here, it's coming in over distance, which gives the opportunity of the midfielders to close her down. She's only a small distance between herself and the midfielders behind us. So you can see that the girls in pink, their forward line and their midfielders are quite close together. So these two girls would naturally close down Ali. And if Ali worked on a late receive and was continuously working on it, but tried to execute the skill in this situation over and over and over again, she would lose confidence in it and wouldn't use it. And for me, this is where a game awareness and helping your players is vital from a coach perspective, and your responsibility to help them to be aware of when is it appropriate. So again, it's less technical coaching, because the technical skills can be difficult to try and execute, and these players, most of them will, as I say, develop it themselves if you give them enough time on the ball to figure it out. What's important is that they do it in the right situations. If you were to watch this clip here of one of the other clips, this ball goes in here to this girl. An easy mistake would have been for this girl to late receive it and be tackled straight away, the initial girl. Again, the difference is she's aware of the game. This is not the opportunity to do it because she's gone through it with her understanding. She has a game awareness to not do it. And for me, this is vital. When you come to something then, for example, like a right foot turn, even everybody on the call might not be aware, okay, how often is this skill used? It's the same questions that I would ask players. Are you aware of it? How often is it used? When is it used? What are the benefits? And do you know how to execute? The last part is, do you know how to execute it? Because when players become aware of how often it's used, when the benefit, they will put a lot of time in themselves to try and figure out how to execute it with your support. So I, for example, wanted to show a club side I was working with how often how important this skill is at a higher level, at all levels, but obviously at a higher level, it's so important, and how often it is used. So I took a European Cup final, And what I did was just showed every occasion that a player turned off his right foot. And what you got to see, the group got to see, was all over the pitch. There we go. In completely different situations, in combative situations like this, trying to win a free, trying to get out, trying to eliminate a player with nobody within 20 yards, nobody coming near him, that this skill is used over and over again. And a lot of people probably just don't notice it. They think this individual here is a superb player. Look how skillful. But actually what they're doing is they're using one skill and turning off their right foot. And your subconscious as anybody is put off when somebody turns off their right foot because it's not natural, and that's where the benefits would come from it. But again, where the responsibility lies as a coach, there's a bit of time has to go into it, but the benefits of showing one game of top level hockey, how often one particular skill is used, will really, really reap the rewards. You can see how many times it has been used in one single game. I won't play it all, but it's over and over. Sometimes it comes up close, over and over. So for what we did again with the Irish ladies team a couple of years ago, Dave has it against some choice music, we made a video, something similar. It wasn't all from one game, but it was just to give them a real visualization on it. And the benefits of it were that the players wanted to take this responsibility themselves. They strived because they took that responsibility themselves to try and learn to run off the right foot. And when you can add in clips like this of your own players doing it, which no doubt 3 years later, as I say, you could put in, probably every clip could be the Irish senior women's team turning off their right foot, because they all embraced it and they all took it on. And what we did was we made a video, and then we made another apologies for that, muted. Another video showing how to execute the skill. And here's a little bit of work. Again, we've no problem sharing these videos. I'm sure Dave would be the same. And not every coach has the time to necessarily do it. So this is the technical aspect of it, that you're really breaking it down, helping them understand. But the most important part of all of this were the questions showing how often is it used, how important is it. You just probably haven't noticed it being used before. So as a coach, this is where I think there is a huge responsibility, and not necessarily from a technical point of view. Dave is going to come on with a couple more technical things in a few minutes, but I'll just finish off, because they were just a couple of examples. There are obviously other really key things, like Dave, I think, is going to do some ball carrying. For me personally, the next most really, really important aspect of helping an individual take it to the next level, and a team as well, is to do with pressing. And what I would ask is, I'm sure everybody here is a different level of coaching, but what I would ask is that you clear your mind of whatever your interpretation of a press is. So it's irrelevant whether it's half court or full court or zonal or marking or whatever press. I would ask that you all try and just clear your mind for a second and understand that what I'm trying to get across, what I value dearly and what I would be working with my group of players coming through here, is that they get the key principles of pressing. And if they get that, then it is irrelevant to what kind of press you want to do. You can stand up 5 minutes before a game and say, I'd like to press like this. And as long as everybody has the key principles and the fundamentals of what's required in pressing, you will find that they'll be able to execute it. So number one for me is the closing speed. Number two is your 1v1 defense. Okay, so the closing speed at which you close the player down, and your 1-against-1 defense. They're the two key elements to pressing, and that's it. And if you have a team that can execute those two skills, you're going to go a long, long way. So what I mean by closing speed, the principles are that you would anticipate, if you're a defensive player, that you will anticipate in a press scenario, whichever one it is, a ball going to your opponent and you will commit fully if you're going to commit. So you don't sit on the fence and go late or be unsure. You commit. If you want to go, you commit and you go early. You anticipate and you commit. The most important part of this is that it's an expression I think Brian O'Driscoll used to use from rugby. You reduce the opponent's think time. The quicker you can close them down, the less time they have to think. And suddenly an 11-11 becomes a 1 against 1 because their head goes down and it becomes too difficult to play. They have no time to think. And then your 1v1 defense says, do not get eliminated. Again, it comes down to terminology, understanding what 1v1 defense is. To give you a visual on it, if you imagine that the player in red is to close down this player in blue, but they go late, what ends up happening is naturally they get caught in no man's land and a pass gets played by them. What I've done again is to give you a visual on it. Again, this is where if you can do this, it's really the benefits are huge and given a really good visual. We have, I think, a match in New Zealand here, and you have Jill Pinder sitting at number 15. And if you were to look at this, whatever press scenario it is, that when this pass gets played to the Indian girl, if Jill anticipates and closes her down, it really doesn't matter what's happening in behind Jill because that opponent's head will go down. And as long as Jill's skill set is good enough that this player will just have to continue to dribble, then she won't get eliminated. What you find happens is a hesitancy. Now you have Jill sitting in no man's land and she's going to get eliminated. If Jill stays with her player and says, right, well, I'm not going to commit to closing you down, then we're in a good defensive scenario. If she commits to her and closes her down, then she can't do anything. What you find is this happens. So
brought back behind the attacker and they missed the opportunity, but they've created 2 or 3 getting in behind.
You see Jill.
That, of course, is always dangerous if you
drifting
get in
around
behind
here.
The defense like that. India looking
and
to try
she anticipates she could have closed
as far
this
as the halfway line.
And when the mentality is there, and what we try to do is give this visualization. When the mentality is there for a player to commit and close down, it doesn't matter what press you have. It's a vital part of understanding what it's about. I'll give you a more of a sorry, I'm trying to get rid of the commentary here this time. When you watch this and you see how aggressive players step, they anticipate and it steps, the next player is ready to step, closing down. And the only difference is here that early enough on, these girls needed to understand that we don't get eliminated. So when you watch, I imagine if it was now and you had this situation, currently Anna would close her, Nikki Daly would close his next girl, and you would find that the New Zealand girl would end up just dribbling back into her own corner. All because they anticipate the step and they go aggressively.
Sunita.
Same situation here.
Grace again back.
The only difference is
support work.
You don't get eliminated. She's a really good aggressive step, closing speed. This girl has no time to think.
Grace again back.
And as long as Anna understands the principles and not get eliminated, you will reap the benefits of it. Okay? So again, the 1v1 defense terminology is vital. If you sit with a group of people and you ask what do you understand by 1v1 defense, what you will find is if you ask a group to what you regard as winning a 1v1 battle, the answers you will get will be very, very varied. But actually, the key, and for me, again, my terminology would be your 1v1 defense is to not get eliminated. And then it's understanding the execution of it, and it's practicing the execution to not give somebody a run and a red carpet, if you will, and not running in too aggressively and get eliminated, but practice to find the balance. When you ask, if you were to ask any coach here, and I often think it's an interesting question, and you say, what is the objective of an opponent's team? What is the objective of your team? And the reality is to find an overload and execute it. That's really, at the end of the day, predominantly as a group, you're trying to find an overload, as in a 2-on-1 somewhere, or create a 2-on-1 and execute it. And if you were to look back and if you think if somebody gets eliminated in a match, you'll trace a lot of goals back to somebody gets eliminated and you have an overload and you execute. And the higher up the level you go in hockey, you will find that most teams will execute overloads when they have them. So with that in mind, that's where your 1v1 defense is huge, that you don't get eliminated and you're gonna stop an opposition getting an overload. What's the snowball effect of this? And this is where it's vital. Again, as a coach, the responsibility is to help players understand and value this. That when your one-on-one defense gets better as a player and you practice it over and over, then the natural progression is that the offensive player's skill set has to improve. So if your closing speed improves as a team, and you're training and you close down a player so quickly and they have no think time, naturally they are going to improve at playing under that pressure. They're going to improve at receiving the ball with somebody hunting them down. And when they improve, the defensive side will improve. And it's the same with a 1v1 defense. When you're playing on 1-against-1, if your defensive side gets better, then your attacking side will naturally progress. And it's the only way for it to happen. So without any coaching involved, if you can get players to place a really high value on it, on their 1-on-1 defense, without having to work on any technical skill set, you're going to reap huge benefits, because your forwards will then improve their skill set and then ask the questions of the defenders to improve again. But it's, as a coach, it's incumbent upon us to monitor that and to continuously push that and to continuously get the players to place real value on it and celebrate it when they do it well. Celebrate when players eliminate or when players can't eliminate, and so on and so forth. And the same situation happens. I know Dave's going to speak a little bit about leading, the technical side of it, but it's the same situation when it comes to marking and leading. Okay. The only other question is then, as again, an awareness as a coach to say, what phase of the game are we in when it comes to 1v1 defense? Are we pressing? Are we defending a counterattack? Are we scrambling for defense? Are we defending a handball scenario? Or are we defending inside our circle? Because that's the only time it becomes different as a 1-on-1 defense, when you eventually have to look to win the ball. And again, as a coach, it's important when you review things and you look at things with players, that the game awareness from them has to be there to say, what phase of the game are we in? Just finally, Dave is going to speak about this and some of the technical aspects behind it. But leading and marking is huge in Irish hockey, and it's huge in most hockey, in all hockey. Why is leading so important? What I often find, and what I've learned over the last number of years coaching, is that so many players don't lead particularly well. And I've often watched games where people will touch the ball 4 or 5 times. Now, I don't know how I would train twice a week or commit to a program when you barely touch the ball. And a huge amount of that is to do with leading. And the reason that leading is so poor is because marking has become so flippant. Because as individuals and collectively, and we're all guilty of it, the value that we've placed on marking and marking aggressively, and I suppose the value you've placed on it has dropped. And once that has dropped, it meant that players don't have to lead. They don't have to try so hard in combative training to get on the ball. Maybe even in games, they mightn't have to try. But when they come up against anybody who's reasonably good at marking, you would find that it becomes quite obvious that we're poor at leading or poor at connecting. This is the big question. How do you add the weight to the value of marking? Because the snowball effect, just like the 1-against-1, is when, without getting technical on it, I've watched training sessions and I've seen coaches try to coach game scenarios in training sessions, or whether they're set drills, that attacking drills, or it's a game scenario. And I've watched people try to coach, and it's impossible to coach when there's nobody leading correctly, or there's no marking going on, more importantly. And again, it comes down to players will strive when we as coaches are driving a training session or driving their standards in terms of marking. And the coaching and the fun part of it as such, and it comes way down the line. And so much of it gets answered. I'm sure Dave will articulate it so much better than I can because he lectures in it. But players will develop themselves, and that's there's a misconception around a player-led environment. When the leading and the marking is absolutely outstanding, a player-led environment is easy, and the culture is great, and we arrive at training, and it's easy as a coach to be hands-off and add little bits of information that you think might help. But the reality is you need to create a player-led environment. And this goes right to international teams. And how you do that is through driving the value on such things as marking and leading. And players then will figure so much out themselves. And then you can coach off it. And that last sentence for me is the most important part. It's a snowball effect. And I think that not overcoaching or looking to overcoach can be one of the most detrimental things. I'm sure, again, as Dave can probably jump in at the start on this, Dave, and maybe express it in a slightly different way. But looking to coach something that isn't ready to be coached is often one of the biggest issues, where just getting groups to understand the value on such things as marking is where so much benefit comes. The last thing I'll say, and I'm sure Dave is going to come in on again on the technical side of leading, but for me, there's one key thing for leading. If you were to ask me from a coach, and that is just you make connections on eyes, and there's nothing else. There's small little areas that you can improve when standard becomes high, but connecting with the ball carrier's eyes is the single most important thing, in my opinion, and the timing of it. And it's easy to coach that when you're running drills or you're doing things, that you just have to correlate that as the eyes come up of the ball carrier and not before and not after, is there an aggressive lead by 2-3 players that they can then make a decision. All right. I think that's me, Dave. I hope that was of benefit. It was just some of the key elements that I would have found important. And I'm sure if there's any questions, you can maybe pop in again. So, all right, Dave.
Thanks, Joe. Phil, are we going to take questions for Joe now, or do you want to do all the questions at the end?
I think we'll probably just save them to the end, Dave.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that, Joe. Always really enjoy listening to you. And I think the fact you played under many of those great coaches was such a benefit to your own playing. I didn't have that benefit, sadly. I'm not going to spend too long introducing myself. I'm sure most, if not all of you, know me. Critically, I'm a parent. I have five teenage kids now. I'm a coach educator, and I'm an educator in an academic setting in that I now work since 2012. I've worked as a lecturer in coaching science and talent development here at DCU, which is where I am at the moment. I've coached at every level, every gender, from under 8s club and school right through to I was the senior men's coach, as many of you know. What I'm currently doing at the moment is assist with the senior women, but my key passion is around talent development. So I work with the equivalent of role as Joe with the women's side. So the National Development Group, which we call the Junior Green Army, which is an under 23 group, but within that sits our under 21s. And we're fortunate enough to, thanks to the withdrawal of New Zealand and Australia, we've been invited to the World Cup in December. So what I want to share with you, and I'm going to strip it even more basic at times, and that's probably my biggest, the biggest marker that I want to get from this session is how, even though I'm developing players to play at a World Cup or at senior level, how much we've had to strip back technically because they don't have the technical skills that they need to be able to progress in their own hockey and therefore to progress us as a nation. And right down to push passing, which we can see one of our players here who came through the development group, Hannah McLaughlin. If you can see here clearly that she's static. So I'm going to talk about some of those and relate them to the Hook for Life. Just thinking about Joe's comfort zone. As part of our national development program, we try and look at all aspects of the player's development. So I just want to share with you from a Junior Green Army perspective, the challenge that we face, which is quite common, I think, but particularly so in girls hockey in Ireland and female hockey. So one of the areas we try to develop them in is their mental skills and developing the skills that will allow them to perform under pressure. So we use this questionnaire, it's called the PCDQ-E2 questionnaire. And what that gives us is a load of data that we can compare to elite athletes around the world from all different sports. So it's research-based. And when you compare us to where we would want people, one of the biggest problems we have are our adverse response to failure. So when Joe talks rightfully about allowing players and pushing players out of their comfort zone, we then have this massive challenge that we know our players don't respond well to failure. So that immediately keeps them in their comfort zone. And we have to push them into a zone of what's called a proximal development, okay, where they're going to push themselves to get better, exactly as Joe's outlined. But how do we deal with this? If this is, so this is the team, and obviously we get it from individual perspective as well. The ideal is that they come out around here at 4 and our girls are right down here. And that's across the board, which is a massive concern. So what we've done as we built our group, what we've talked around it is, well, what's the purpose of what the program does? And then what are the values that the players hold true to that? So what you see in front of you is basically what the players have come up with. So Joe talked about that. He touched about empowerment of the players, and it's got to come from them. So what we've done here is given them a license to think, well, what is it they want to achieve? They want to be better every day than they were the day before in every task. They want to be ready to perform at the highest level under pressure, physically, technically, tactically, lifestyle, and in life in general. So if you take those top 2 points, they've given themselves and us as a management team, the license to really push them, and they have to expect that push from themselves. So they come out of that zone of comfort all the time. And when they've talked about, well, what are their true values? The values around consistently performing higher quality in everything they do every day. So because we've drawn that out from them, rather than pushed it on them exactly as Joe said, this is our one-pager for our culture document that allows us all the time to push and push and push. And at the end of every session, we'll often just go, right, out of 10, how have we consistently brought higher levels of quality to what we do? And higher levels means that you're going to improve day on day. And what they have to accept is that failure is a part of producing quality. So what I'm going to talk about is relate to the technical ribbons that we have within the Hook for Life. So if you look at some of our old coaching videos that we developed some time ago for sort of the introductory award and the level 1, I would disagree with most of those videos now. So what we want you as developers of young players, of talented young players who we want to move forward into an international environment, is just to keep remembering these things. Number 1, that everything they should do, they should be able to have their eyes up both on and off the ball. Okay, so they're not going to lead if they're not looking for space and the opportunity to lead, if they're not looking at the time the ball's going to be passed by the ball carrier. That every pass and every receive where possible is on the move and dynamic. Okay, so we shouldn't be teaching them to hit on the move, push on the move. Statically, we should be doing that on the move. And every receive should have a next movement to it, which is what I would describe as dynamic. And if we want to sort of play forwards and have an attacking ability, that we have to be able to do everything with our feet either facing forwards or to get our feet and therefore our body facing forwards as quickly as we can with our first touch. So Joe showed a post-up lead there. That's important that we're able to receive the ball back to goal. But what he talked about was having the technique and the skill to move as fast as possible on an arc to face forwards. So I'm just going to show you some of the key areas that we've been looking at, which relate more to the women's game, because obviously that's where I'm working at. And we're going to cover these 4 things and the technical components of these and strip it down and make it look quite simple. So if we talk about the receiving skills, I'm not going to talk as much about leading because Joe's touched upon that. There is leading components in this, but the big change in the women's game over the last period of time is that most teams are playing zonally. So they're marking space and passing channels more than they're following an individual around, particularly in structured pressuring situations. They will drop to man, where the leading becomes even more important. So what we've tried to do is to work on our ability to receive a ball to play forwards in zones, but we tended to work on that in isolation. And what we found is that we could receive the ball, but we couldn't pass it. So we'd play from a defensive line into a midfield line, but we couldn't then pass it into a forward line. Okay. So I just wanted to have a look at this. We were fortunate to get out of lockdown and go over to Spain, albeit that our 5 midfielders that we were bringing with us were contacts, close contacts. So we had to travel without any midfield. And this was just a piece of video we used with the girls because we went to watch Spain the day before, the 2 Spanish teams that were there, their development team and their under 21s. And all I got them to do was look off the ball. And what the girls started to realize was how much, if you look at this girl here, this girl was young. She was under 21 player of the tournament. Her name's Chapato. So just look here, how many times she scans and where she scans. So the ball's back here, but she's looking over to the left side. Now she's looking over to the right side. Now she's looking, and she hasn't faced the defense at all. So when we talk about facing forwards in receipt, what I'm adding to that now is the ability to receive the ball and be able to play passes. And the problem is that if you watch most Irish players in this situation, they'll all be watching the ball because they're so panic stricken that the ball might come to them when they're not waiting. But for me, that is the responsibility of the player behind checking before they pass the ball that the player's waiting to receive. So that comes back to that eyes up. So if you can still see the ball's started playing now, but she's still scanning what options, where the space is and what passing options she has, because only now can she start to position to get the ball. She's already just checked to see where this player is. And now she's moving to a position, she's checked forward here. So she's finding some space. So now she can receive a ball and potentially play through this channel. So this is us in white. So you can see that we're playing in zones. We're not playing man to man. Okay. And you can still see she's scanning. So just in this simple task of getting the girls to watch off the ball, and obviously a little bit of prompting and questioning, we realized that the girls really realized how this is coached in other countries far more than it's coached with us. So we're trying to get them comfortable coming out of their comfort zone and not having to watch the ball at all the time. All right, so now she's moved into a position to receive the second ball. So it was obvious to her that the ball was going here. So she's now moved into a position where she can potentially play forward, but back to the bad pass. Okay, so there's the rationale. That's what we're trying to achieve. And I just want to give you some exercises that we've been using that you can bring to your own coaching, your own coaches. So one, I try and do as much as possible through games. So a simple exercise to do this. Here's the halfway line. Here's the 23-meter line. It's a 3v3, but actually it's more of a 2v2 in the middle here. So 2 midfielders against 2 midfielders. Okay, and to start with, these players want to receive the ball from their teammate, so blue to blue, and play to red to score a point. Okay, so what we're looking for is, if this player's moving around, she's got to scan and position relative to these two defenders to be able to receive this ball from the defender and then play it to a forward or to another midfielder. Okay, so just playing that game with the points, we find helps. It's over 25 meters, but then we add in, for example, that we want them to try and play mid to mid and then to go forwards. So we give that 2 points. So if it's through one player, it's 1 point. If it's through two players, it's 2 points. What we found then is that they tend to then mark, which is not the context we find our players in. So we say if they hit the ball from back to front, that's also a point. So now the defenders have to zone and mark the line to this defender as well. So let's just have a look at that. So this is footage from a couple of weeks ago. This is that activity that you've just seen. It comes into focus in a sec, but we've extended it now. Okay, so you've got your 2v2 in the middle in a tight channel, but now we have 2 additional players, and you'll see why if I just scroll this on a little bit. So if you watch now, there are 2 whites who are trying to play to 2 whites, but the green, one of the greens now from this end has stepped up. So now you have a zonal press. So these 2 can pass it, and they're trying to play to these girls who are trying to receive it to play to this player whose shadow you can see. So we've gone from a 3 to a 3 to a 3v3 to a 4v4. So as you can see, unsuccessful. Same again. These players moving so they can play to each other, and there you've got a successful one. But if you watch and compare it back to the Spanish goal, you can look in either one, look at how we're always facing backwards when we want to play forwards. All right, so culturally and technically, we can't just say to them, this is what we want you to do, it's going to work. So we train this as one of our warm-ups every week. All right, so that you now start to get players who look to be side on in a zone where they can break a press and potentially break a seam. So a seam being a line between 2 players. So if we can get a player in here, that seam's broken. If get a player behind these 2, that seam's broken. Okay. All right, so there's the unsuccessful one, and watch again. So if we watch this girl here, come deep, open her body, she's still not scanned, but she does just know where that player is. So now we've broken the zone, and now they've scored a 2 points. So now it goes the other way. So the greens now have the ball, and there's now a zone of 3 whites. So we can, through playing this game, get quality through just continuously doing and continuously coaching those same points I showed you at the end, at the beginning. You're going to see that, you're going to get the recording so you can recap. Most critically, move to a zone where I can break a seam, move to a zone where I can pass the ball forwards, position myself so I can link with that player and go forwards. Okay, so just another view just from the drone. Here we go again. So we've 2 greens, we'll have 3 whites. So up steps the white, and now we're looking to play in behind and position ourselves where we can receive side on to go forwards. And we don't have to lead very much, but we do have to move smartly and purposefully. All right. And that's the thing that we find because we don't play indoor. And the girls always say to me, well, look how narrow this channel is relative to what they'd be playing in a game. But my view is, well, if we can coach them to play in that channel and get them to feel comfortable when they go into a pressured situation and the area is bigger, it feels easier for them. And that's just explaining to them. So what we then have to see is, can our players bring what we've done in training into gameplay? So just an example. So can we play in an 11-11? This is against Wales. So here's a ball going into a pocket, players in spaces, can we receive the ball and turn forwards? All right, so not on that time because she hadn't scanned. Okay, we always want to lead back, but we want the players in these zones so that now we can start to play forwards. But you'll see again that she hadn't scanned and linked with the forwards. So that was kind of phase 2. And I can't really say we're moving much beyond that. This was last weekend. We played a couple of matches against England over in Bisham. So now we're beginning to find that we can get players playing in the zones, but now looking to scan and link and play forwards. So there we go. Receive late, as Joe called it. And now the ability to play forwards. Sorry, I've just restarted that. So now we've got to be able to play forwards. Boom. Now we've played forwards. And without that, okay, and without that ability to look and scan and link, so if you watch this player here now, coming through here, she's side on, and now she's scanning to this player here, okay? Just going to go back to the last one. So are we making progress? Yes. Does this happen consistently enough? No. And where does it now need to go? So we've now got a forward pass here. So we've, sorry, the video just keeps flipping to the next one. Okay, here we go. So we now get the ball. So we breached the press, we've broken the press. But at this point, we now needed a player thinking a pass ahead to get in behind their line. But right now, that feels like progress. All right, because now we haven't got another pass and we have to play backwards. Next one here then, we start to get the challenges and what do we need to do in given situations. So yes, we're beginning to scan forward here, but also the forward here has got to be able to link and think and play off this player. So what happens here is England have dropped up us a little bit, but this player's stepped up and to mark. So there, she's come out of a zone. So now we need to ask questions of this player, because if she just turns and receives there, she's just going to run straight into this right midfield or centre midfield here. So the final phase now is getting them to think, well, what do I do in these situations when they go from a zone to man to man? Okay. And this should be, is this the next one? Maybe I've pulled off the wrong clip because there was a really nice clip to show how this player could take this player away. If this player moved, we had an overload on the side. It must be this one. Yeah, here it is, apologize. So you can see that player's moved up. So because she's up here now, we want to try and overload this zone. So we've got to make this player make a choice. If she leads to here, we now have an overload with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against 3. Okay, so if this player stays where she is and this player goes, we now have an overload, but we want this player to respond. Okay, because if she goes with her and that's not the overload, then we want this player to drop in here so we can play the ball into this zone. We can't do that unless we start to position, have trust and scan forwards. So it really is the process of being comfortable, not looking forwards when the ball is behind you. Okay, so hopefully you can all see that, and you can see the pathway we want to go to, because if she moved into that zone now, we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players against 2. Okay, and we don't often do it because we just don't read and move appropriately to our situation. Okay, second point, and I'll try and combine these a little bit, is one of our biggest weaknesses in the women's game technically is our ability to push a ball on the move. And I can't stress enough how important this is. And post-lockdown, when players started to come back, we were able to spend time on a pitch working on this on a weekly basis for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And what I want to just show you is the process of that. Okay. So the big problem is if a girl's going to, or if a player's going to pass the ball, and the lads probably don't do this as much, they turn their body, so their shoulders are pointing where they want to pass. And that means they can't really do that at pace. And yet the game, because of fitness levels, physiology, sports science, has gone so much quicker. And if we think back to our hook for life principles, we want our feet pointing forward and our body. So we don't want to turn sideways. If we turn sideways, we broadcast the fact that A, we're going to push it. We have to slow down if we're going fast and running with our feet pointing forwards. And then we indicate where we're going to play the ball. So immediately we give the opposition a focus. So I just want to show you how we did this. We had 3 kind of key points that we wanted: feet and body facing forward, it was on the move, and with the eyes up. And we used what we call implicit coaching, which is where you take away sort of, you go away from specific coaching points to this. So if you just have a look here then, okay. So the passing, I've told them to do these 3 things, but it's pretty poor. Like there's very little power of it. They're not coming out of their comfort zone. Okay. Now watch carefully, because what they've just done is they've moved to one hand. So at the point where they're about to deliver that ball, they have to go one-handed. Okay. And that, they feel stupid. It doesn't look or feel right. But what it forces them to do is to throw their body weight and their wrist through the ball. So we have a very simple sort of coaching process where, if let's just pick one of these. So let's pick the girl here where she's not done it very well. A lot of them do what she does is they start the push before they've got a step. So if I'm kicking a rugby ball, or I'm hitting a hurley ball, a slitter with a hurley, or if I'm taking a penalty in soccer, I have to have a foot planted to put my body weight through. So if I kick my right foot, I plant my left foot. What a lot of our players don't do is they don't have that foot planted when they're trying to push, power push, or push over distance. So these are for midfielders or forwards going through rather than for defenders passing it around the back. So if you watch this girl here, so what she's done there is she has carried the ball with 2 hands. So she's on the move, but at the point she goes to play the pass, she moves to one hand. So you can see she's taken her other hand off. She has stamps her foot, and now she can throw her body weight through. So if you compare these 2 that have just released the ball, this player's thrown her body weight through because she's got the balance to be able to counteract that. This player hasn't, because she started to push it before she'd got the balance of throwing her body weight through a step. So we just did loads of this, and we started building up. They're doing it over sort of about 20, 25 meters here. And we just started to build it one hand, one hand, one hand. And then the technique started to grow. So I can quickly see which girls have been doing this a while, like this player and these 2 players. So this girl will give us a good example of really throwing the body weight through. Okay, if you look, she's moving on an angle there. So what you'll see is they almost end up with their back is like a table. All right, so their shoulders are level with their hips. All right, shoulders are level with their hips. So what we found then is when we go back to 2 hands, it's so much better. This might be the same video. So the process is step, drop, fire, step. Give yourself the platform, drop your body. So your shoulders drop to the lines of your hips. Now you can throw your body weight through and then fire the right hand, which some of the girls are uncomfortable doing. But that's where the final phase of real pace comes from. Okay, I think this might be the same video. Okay, so now they've gone 2-handed, and you'll just see the pace of the ball is significantly higher. You don't get real pace from the context of the pace from the drone, but if you watch, these 2 have been doing it the longest. So it's on the move, and now they're throwing their body weight through because they can, because they've got that step. And then we added in components of moving on angles, eyes up, and on the move. So then this would have been the sort of exercise then where we develop it. So playing a sort of 2v2 in the circle, and there's a 2v2 here. So this is an attacker. This player will become a midfielder. And then we're looking at what we call posting up. Now, I talked to the girls about this, and I watch men's hockey, and it's almost all you see in this zone, because this zone is so congested now. You'll often have 20 players in this zone alone. So the space is often, you stretch the space high and you lead back for the ball. Okay, but you want to try and get into the blind side of the defender. Okay, so what we want to try and do here is time our push passing with the lead of this player to post up to get the ball. Okay, and it's very similar before, and Joe mentioned this about the importance of linking. So the pusher, we want them eyes up on the move, try and play with disguise, and then a good receive will be they meet the pass. So they're not standing waiting for it. The ball is still moving and the player still moving. What are we looking for these players to do then is to get in the defender's blind spot, to signal. Okay, we use stick and hand. So when this player is looking up, if I'm going to post up, I'm going to show because I want the ball passed to my stick. If I want the ball played to this zone, I point it with my hand. Okay, and this concept then is that there's a space here. The ball's passed. As the ball's delivered, then the player moves into it, so they meet the pass. All right. Okay, let's just have a look. They'll let me down now. So push pass on the move, and you can see all wrong. So I threw that in there deliberately because that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for these players to be able to power a pass through, okay, and this player to come and meet it on the move. And you can see exactly what we found. And when I watch games, that's what I see. I see players holding on to the ball too long because their eyes aren't up. I don't see these players link and then time their movement, okay? And I don't see players meeting the ball on the move, all right? Okay, so that was something we really had to work on. And now we'd be doing this pass from back near the 23. So there's a better lead, a better push pass, and the timing was much better. Okay, so pushing on the move, lead, static, no good. All right, so that was back in about May time. So we are infinitely better at this now, I'd hope. Okay, but again, does our training then transfer into our match play? So again, this is from England. Let's turn the sound off. So if you watch this girl here now, this was one of the girls I showed you that couldn't push the ball earlier. And now she's made that good push pass with disguise off her right foot. And we get comfortably in the circle. And actually we won a corner there, but the umpire chose not to give it. Just let me show you again. So this player on the move, hard push pass, which gives this player a much better chance of receiving it as she wants, and then attacking the space afterwards. So we're looking always to give and go. And that's the advantage of push passing on the move, is that the push forwards should throw the momentum of the player forward so that she supports her pass, and she should be trying to get in front of this player by way of a give and go. What does a real good post-up lead look like? So my son's fortunate enough to be working as an analyst in the Dutch men's Hoofde class. So you've got some of the best players in the world playing in here. So what are we looking? You can see players trying to get into the blind spot. So although the ball's over here, this defender now is turning away from the site of ball, okay? And you'll see them trying to just peel away so that other people get into the blind spot and post up lead, okay? And they're the kind of leads and movement that we don't see in the women's game yet, okay? Just let you see it again. Okay, so you'll see this sort of this rotational movement, but individually each player is in the blind spot, posting up, post up, and then allowing, if they don't get the ball, they're clearing the space for somebody else to post up in. All right, just one more example. So from the blind spot, looking to get into the blind spot, stretching. So now the space is here. Okay, post up lead, and he was able to roll. And as we talked about, play forwards immediately. Okay, I'll just let you see that pass again. Okay, so there's the space. Post up, good pass, rolled, turn the defender, and can get a shot away. Okay, so these two we tried to interlink, but they're both massive weaknesses. We're short of time, so Phil, do you want me to just quickly talk about transitional skills, or shall I stop there?
Sorry, Dave, say that again.
Do you want me to stop there, or do you want me just to talk briefly about transition skills?
Oh, I would keep going if everyone's happy for you to keep going, keep going.
Okay, so transition skills, there's two types of transition. One is from defense to attack, and the other one's from attack to defense. And our big issue is that we don't believe we coach this or even make an emphasis of it. And it should be a key emphasis for games we play. So I think this is something that really Sean has really impacted me on, in terms of how many times do you win a ball in a game? Well, I think on our first game against England, we had something like 78 defensive turnovers. So where we won the ball, attacking turnovers where we won the ball, and we can. But the biggest thing we lack, and the hardest thing to coach when a kid's 20, 19, 20, is what I call the -1 mentality, which is when they recognize the moment that they're about to win the ball before they win it, because that's the moment you can catch off guard. So if I see Joe's about to intercept a pass and I take off, when Joe receives that pass, immediately he's able to play potentially to me, or I've got the initiative over my defender because I've gone into the attacking zone before he's thought about defending it, or she. The other big problem that we found when we looked at our own sort of transitions into attack, or to trying to build a counter attack, is that we always played backwards and sideways, or we played to the outside of the pitch as much as possible. All right, and one of the key components of this is about the ball position. So I coach through principles. Joe talked about principles. So you've got to anticipate, secure the ball. But I'm just going to focus on our ability to play the ball forwards, which is so dictated, the ball forwards to the middle of the pitch. Okay, so I'm just going to flip straight to a game again. So we're playing two teams. What looks like 2v1 becomes 3v2, 4v3. Okay, but I want you to watch the first couple of clips and think, well, if I'm the goalie, the hardest place to receive a shot is down that middle line. So these three have to play in this zone, and then these three will play 2v1 in this zone. Then we played 4v3 in these zones. Okay, so if you watch, where do the passes go? So pass number one goes into out. So now we're shooting from wide. Happy goalie, happy days. Okay, other team will now go. Okay, all right, this is at the start of the exercise before we brought it to high tempo. Okay, it's actually right at the beginning because they're not understanding what they're supposed to be doing. So quick bounce. All right, and the key thing here now is that this player has the ball in a position where she can pass to this player. And ideally, we want this player to receive the ball, and we want her to receive it in the middle of the goal. But we have this habit of running away from goal and giving them the ball. That's easy for the defender, because right now the defender's on the left, the attacker's on the reverse six side, okay, and central goal. This player, or if the ball's on this side of the defender, she's happy because it's on her forehand side. So yet again, we run the ball. That slows any kind of counter attack down, and we tend to play the ball to the outside. Coming back the other way. Okay, just bear in mind, we're just building up to get this into a high intensity so they understand it. But I just wanted you to see what they did naturally. And you can see, if you watch this for another 5 minutes, we just run into outside zones. That's now easy to play forehand to forehand, and we should be stopping balls like that. Okay. So I think we played this for 5 or 10 minutes. Again, it's a nice pass, and okay, it's come back into here. to the center circle. But I wanted just to let them play this exercise before I really showed them what I wanted to get from it. Okay, so now there might have been a bit of coaching going on. So what we should ideally now see, that in the transition, rather than running outside like that, okay, we keep this player inside, or unless this player feels she can go inside. Okay. So now she stayed there. Now you get the ball in the middle of the goal, and it's far easier to get a shot from there. Okay. Whoops, I didn't get it to where I wanted to go. So quite simply, once we train this now, all the time in transition, we want to be able to play more direct. And it's not about players leading away when they're down the reverse stick side of the defender. It's about them staying in the central area and us having the ball position, the skills, the fakes to be able to just make that pass down the left foot of the defender. All right, so now we should see the success rate goes up. And of course, there's always the individual who wants to run to the outside. There's a lot more to that I was going to show you. I was going to show you the 3v2s, but I'd rather answer questions and save that for some other time.